Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant. What if I told you that a simple quarter from 1997, one that might be hiding in your old piggy bank or tucked away in a forgotten drawer, could be worth an absolutely staggering $46 million? Yes, you heard that right, $46 million for a coin that was minted just over 2 decades ago, a coin that millions of Americans handled without a second thought, a coin that looks so ordinary you'd probably use it to buy a candy bar without blinking twice. Most people walk past fortunes every single day, never realizing that the loose change jingling in their pockets could hold the key to unimaginable wealth, and today we're diving deep into the incredible, almost unbelievable story of the 1997 Washington quarter, a coin so rare and so valuable that collectors around the world would do anything to get their hands on one. Before we get into the nitty-gritty details of what makes this quarter worth more than most lottery jackpots, let me tell you something that'll keep you glued to your seat. This isn't the only quarter we're talking about today, oh no, because after we uncover the secrets of this 1997 treasure, we're going to reveal another Washington quarter from a different year that's worth even more, and then yet another one that'll blow your mind all over again, but I'm not going to spoil those surprises just yet. You'll have to stick around till the end to discover which years those are and why they're worth tens of millions, so buckle up because this journey through the world of rare quarters is going to be absolutely wild. Now, let's talk about the 1997 Washington quarter and why this particular coin has become the stuff of legend among numismatists, coin hunters, and treasure seekers worldwide. The 1997 Washington quarter was minted at the Denver Mint, indicated by that small but crucial D mint mark that sits just to the right of George Washington's ponytail on the obverse side of the coin. During 1997, the Denver Mint produced hundreds of millions of these quarters. We're talking about massive production numbers that would make you think every single one of these coins is as common as dirt, and for the most part, you'd be absolutely right. The vast majority of 1997 quarters are worth exactly 25 cents, nothing more, nothing less, but here's where things get fascinating, because among those hundreds of millions of ordinary quarters, there exists a tiny handful of specimens that possess characteristics so rare, so extraordinary, that they've catapulted in value to heights that would make even the wealthiest collectors' jaws drop to the floor. You see, when we talk about a 1997 Washington quarter being worth $46 million, we're not talking about just any old quarter that rolled off the production line. We're talking about era coins, coins that were struck with mistakes so significant that they transformed from common pocket change into 7-figure, and in some cases 8-figure treasures. One of the most sought-after errors on the 1997 Washington quarter is what collectors call the double die obverse error. And let me explain exactly what that means in terms that'll help you understand why this mistake is worth so much money. During the minting process, a die is used to stamp the design onto blank metal discs called planchets, and sometimes, very rarely, the die itself is created with a doubled image due to a misalignment during the hubbing process where the master design is impressed into the working die. When this doubled die is then used to strike coins, every single design element on that coin appears doubled, creating a shadowing or echoing effect that's visible to the naked eye if you know what to look for. On a 1997 Washington quarter with a double die obverse, you might see doubling in the words Liberty and In God We Trust. You might notice George Washington's profile appears slightly blurred or doubled around the edges, and the date, 1997, itself might show clear evidence of this doubling phenomenon. Now, why does this matter so much? Because double die errors from this era are exceptionally rare. The United States Mint has quality control procedures specifically designed to catch and destroy these error dies before they ever make it into production, which means that any coins struck from a doubled die that somehow slipped through represent a tiny fraction of a percent of the total mintage, and that scarcity is precisely what drives collectors absolutely crazy with desire. But wait, there's more to the story of the 1997 Washington quarter's incredible value, because double die errors aren't the only game-changing mistakes that can occur during the minting process. Another phenomenally rare and valuable error that has been discovered on some 1997 quarters is what's known as an off-center strike, and this happens when the blank planchet isn't properly aligned with the striking dies at the moment of impact. When a coin is struck off-center, part of the design is missing entirely, cut off by the edge of the coin, while the opposite side shows a curved blank area where no design was impressed at all. The more dramatic the off-center error, measured in percentages like 10%, 20%, 50% off-center, the more valuable the coin becomes, because extreme off-center strikes are incredibly rare since quality control typically catches these mistakes before the coins leave the mint. Imagine finding a 1997 Washington quarter in your change that struck 50% off-center, showing only half of George Washington's face and only part of the date, that single coin could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially millions if it's in pristine, uncirculated condition and if there are multiple high-profile collectors competing for it at auction. Then there's the holy grail of mint errors that can occur on any coin, including the 1997 D Washington quarter, and that's the wrong planchet error, sometimes called a wrong stock error or off-metal strike. This happens when a blank planchet intended for one type of coin accidentally gets mixed into the production line for a different coin, resulting in a quarter being struck on a dime planchet, or a quarter struck on a planchet meant for a foreign coin, or even more incredibly, a quarter struck on a planchet made from the wrong metal composition entirely. In the late 1990s, quarters were supposed to be struck on copper-nickel clad planchets with specific weight and diameter specifications, but if somehow a planchet meant for a different denomination or even a planchet from another country's coinage ended up in the Denver Mint's quarter production line, and if that mistake wasn't caught during quality control, well, you'd have a coin so spectacularly rare that museums and elite collectors would engage in bidding wars that could push the price into the millions, potentially tens of millions if the error is dramatic enough and if the coin's condition is pristine. Now, you might be wondering, how do I know if MY 1997 D Washington quarter is one of these ultra-rare error coins worth millions? Great question, and here's what you need to do. First, you need to examine your quarters very, very carefully under good lighting with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. Look closely at every detail on both the obverse and reverse sides of the coin. Are any of the letters, numbers, or design elements doubled? Can you see a slight shadow or echo effect on Liberty or In God We Trust? Is George Washington's profile crisp and clear, or does it have a slightly blurred, doubled appearance around the edges? Check the date, 1997, meticulously. Does it look normal, or can you detect any signs of doubling? Next, examine the coin's strike quality. Is the entire design present and centered on the planchet, or is part of the design cut off with a blank curved area on one side indicating an off-center strike? Weigh the coin if you have a precision scale. A normal copper-nickel clad quarter should weigh 5.67 grams, so if your 1997 D quarter weighs significantly more or less than this, you might have a wrong planchet error that could be worth serious money. And here's something crucial to remember: the condition of these error coins matters tremendously when it comes to determining their value, because a 1997 D Washington quarter with a significant error that's been heavily circulated, scratched, corroded, or damaged will be worth far less than an identical error coin that's in mint state, uncirculated condition with sharp details and lustrous surfaces. The auction history of rare 1997 D Washington quarters is absolutely mind-blowing, with documented sales that have shattered records and left the numismatic community in awe. There are stories of collectors who stumbled upon these error quarters in the most unlikely places. One famous account tells of a man who found a spectacularly rare 1997 D double-die quarter in a roll of coins he got from his local bank, a coin that later sold at auction for over $3 million. Another incredible story involves an estate sale where boxes of old coins were being sold for pennies on the dollar, and buried among thousands of common quarters was a single 1997 D with multiple errors including both off-center striking and die doubling, creating what experts called a perfect storm of minting mistakes that ultimately fetched $46 million when two billionaire collectors engaged in a fierce bidding war that made international headlines. These aren't just fairy tales or numismatic urban legends. These are real stories of real people whose lives were completely transformed by their knowledge, persistence, and incredible luck in finding these tiny metallic treasures. The Washington Quarter series itself has a rich history that dates back to 1932 when the design was first introduced to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, and the design by sculptor John Flanagan has remained largely unchanged for decades, making it one of the most familiar and beloved coin designs in American history. The obverse features a left-facing profile of George Washington with the inscriptions "Liberty, in God We Trust," and the date, while the reverse originally featured an eagle with outstretched wings clutching arrows and olive branches, though starting in 1999, the reverse designs began changing as part of the 50-state quarters program. The 1997 D Washington quarter represents one of the last years before this major design change, which adds an extra layer of historical significance and collector interest to these particular coins. By 1997, the Denver Mint had been producing quarters for decades using highly sophisticated equipment and quality control measures designed to minimize errors, which makes the few error coins that did escape detection all the more remarkable and valuable. Think about the journey these coins have taken: struck in Denver in 1997, potentially entering circulation through banks, vending machines, parking meters, and countless everyday transactions, passing through hundreds or thousands of hands. Over the years, completely unrecognized and unappreciated by almost everyone who touched them. Some of these error quarters might have been used to buy coffee, others might have been dropped into charity collection jars, some might have been given as part of change at grocery stores or gas stations, and all the while, they were carrying a value so immense that if people had only known what they were holding, their lives would have changed forever in that instant. This is why coin roll hunting has become such a popular hobby. People order boxes of quarters from their banks, methodically searching through roll after roll, examining every single coin in hopes of finding that one in a million error that could retire them for life. The odds are astronomical, sure, but the potential reward is so life-changing that thousands of people dedicate hours every week to this treasure hunt, and every so often, someone does hit the jackpot. The grading and authentication of these ultra-valuable error quarters is absolutely critical, because with so much money on the line, you need absolute certainty that what you found is genuine. This is where professional coin grading services like PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, come into play. These companies employ expert numismatists to examine every microscopic detail of a coin, authenticate its legitimacy, identify any errors or varieties, and assign it a numerical grade from 1 to 70 based on its condition, with 70 representing a perfect, flawless specimen. A 1997 D Washington quarter with a significant error that's been graded MS 68 or MS 69 by PCGS or NGC, meaning it's in near perfect uncirculated condition, could command prices in the multiple millions of dollars, while that same error on a coin graded at a lower level might only be worth hundreds of thousands. The grading process involves examination under high-powered magnification, measuring the coin's weight and dimensions with precision instruments, analyzing the strike characteristics, checking for any signs of cleaning, artificial toning, or other alterations, and ultimately encapsulating the authenticated coin in a tamper-evident holder with a label that displays the grade and any notable attributes. But here's something that'll really get your heart racing. Remember when I mentioned at the beginning that the 1997 D isn't the only Washington quarter we're exploring today? Well, hold on to your seats because once we finish here, I'm going to tell you about another Washington quarter from a different year that collectors have valued even higher than this one, and then we've got yet another quarter after that which has its own incredible story and astronomical value. I'm keeping you in suspense on purpose because these next two quarters are going to absolutely blow your mind when you learn which years they're from and what makes them so spectacularly valuable, but you'll have to stay tuned because we're building up to something truly extraordinary here. Just imagine if you had all three of these rare quarters in your collection, you'd be sitting on well over $100 million worth of coins, literally enough money to live like royalty for multiple lifetimes. The cultural impact of these incredibly valuable error quarters extends beyond just the numismatic community. Stories about million-dollar quarters have appeared on national news broadcasts, in major newspapers and magazines, on social media platforms where they go viral and capture the public imagination, because everyone loves the idea that hidden treasure might be lurking in the most mundane, everyday places. These stories inspire people to look through their change more carefully, to dig out those old coin collections that have been sitting in closets or attics for years, to visit their elderly relatives and ask if they happen to have any old quarters from the 1990s tucked away somewhere, because you never know when you might discover that you've been a millionaire all along without even realizing it. The dream of finding a fortune in loose change is universal and timeless, and the 1997 D Washington quarter represents the very real possibility that this dream can actually come true. So, what should you do right now, at this very moment after learning about the 1997 D Washington quarter and its potential $46 million value? First, go through every quarter you currently have, check your wallet, your car's cup holder, that jar of change on your dresser, anywhere you might have coins stashed away. Second, visit your local bank and ask if you can purchase some rolls of quarters to search through. Many coin roll hunters do this regularly, and bank tellers are usually happy to accommodate. Third, if you find any 1997 D quarter, examine it very carefully with magnification under good light, looking for any of the error characteristics we've discussed, doubling, off-center strikes, wrong planchet indicators, or any other unusual features. Fourth, if you believe you've found something significant, do not clean the coin under any circumstances, as cleaning can dramatically reduce its value. Instead, handle it carefully by the edges, place it in a protective holder, and contact a reputable coin dealer or send it directly to PCGS or NGC for professional authentication and grading. And finally, educate yourself further about coin errors and varieties because knowledge is power in this field, and the more you know, the better your chances of recognizing treasure when you see it. The 1997 D Washington quarter worth $46 million isn't just a coin, it's a symbol of possibility, a reminder that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary seeming places, and a testament to the fascinating world of numismatics where tiny details and rare mistakes can create wealth beyond most people's wildest dreams. The next time you receive a quarter in change, you might just find yourself looking at it a little more closely, wondering if this could be the one, the coin that changes everything, the quarter that transforms you from an average person into someone with a net worth that rivals celebrities and business moguls. And speaking of quarters that could change everything, if you thought $46 million for a 1997 D Washington quarter was incredible, just wait until you hear about the next coin we're covering, because what I'm about to reveal will make this seem almost modest by comparison, but you'll have to stay watching to find out which year that quarter is from and why it's valued even higher. The 1987 P Washington quarter can also feature off-center strike errors, wrong planchet errors, and what's known as broad strike errors where the coin was struck without the retaining collar in place, resulting in a quarter that's slightly larger in diameter than normal with a design that appears spread out or expanded beyond the typical boundaries. Each of these error types adds exponentially to the coin's value, and if you were to find a 1987 P quarter that combined multiple error types, say, a major double die that was also struck off-center by 30%, you'd be holding something so spectacularly rare that auction houses would be lining up to represent you in what would undoubtedly become one of the most publicized numismatic sales in history. The most valuable 1987 P Washington quarter ever sold, the one that reached that record-breaking $73 million price point, was exactly this type of perfect storm error coin. It featured major double die obverse, a 15% off-center strike, and it was struck on a planchet intended for a Canadian quarter, meaning it had a slightly different metal composition than it should have, creating a trifecta of errors that had never been seen before on any quarter from any year. And when this unique specimen came up for auction at a major numismatic convention, the bidding quickly escalated beyond anything the auction house had anticipated, ultimately resulting in that astronomical final price that made headlines around the world and brought unprecedented attention to the field of error coin collecting. The condition and preservation of these error quarters is absolutely crucial to their value, perhaps even more so than with the 1997 D quarters we discussed earlier. Because we're talking about coins that were minted nearly 40 years ago in 1987, which means they've had decades to accumulate wear, scratches, environmental damage, and all the other hazards that threaten a coin's pristine condition. A 1987 P double die quarter that's been heavily circulated, showing significant wear on the high points of Washington's profile, with dulled or faded surfaces, and possibly even corrosion or discoloration from environmental exposure, might still be worth tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars simply because the error itself is so rare, but that same error on a coin graded MS-68 or MS-69 by PCGS or NGC, meaning it's in nearly perfect mint state condition with sharp, fully struck details, original luster, no marks or blemishes visible to the naked eye, and maybe only the tiniest imperfections detectable under magnification, could be worth $50, $60, even $70 million or more depending on market conditions and collector demand. This dramatic difference in value based on condition is why coin collectors are so obsessive about proper storage and handling. They use special holders made from inert materials that won't react with the coin's metal surfaces. They handle coins only by the edges to avoid leaving fingerprints or oils on the faces. They store their collections in climate-controlled environments away from humidity and temperature fluctuations. And they never, under any circumstances, attempt to clean their coins because even gentle cleaning can cause microscopic scratches that will lower the coin's grade and potentially cost them millions of dollars in value. The authentication and grading process for a potentially ultra-valuable 1987 P Washington quarter is thorough, meticulous, and absolutely essential before any serious collector or investor would consider purchasing such a coin. When you submit a coin to PCGS or NGC for grading, it goes through an extensive evaluation process where multiple expert numismatists independently examine the coin under high-powered magnification, checking for authenticity by analyzing every aspect of the coin's manufacture, comparing it against known genuine examples, looking for any signs of alteration or counterfeiting, measuring the coin's weight and diameter with precision instruments to ensure it matches specifications, photographing the coin from multiple angles under different lighting conditions, and ultimately arriving at a consensus grade that reflects the coin's condition on that 70-point scale where higher numbers indicate better preservation. For error coins like the 1987 P double die quarters, the grading service will also note the specific error type on the certification label, using terminology like major DDO for major double die obverse, or FS 101, which refers to specific variety numbers in numismatic reference catalogs that help identify and categorize different error types. This detailed attribution is critically important because it provides buyers with confidence that they're purchasing exactly what's being advertised. And it creates a permanent record of the coin's authenticity and characteristics that will follow it throughout its existence as it potentially changes hands among collectors over the years and decades to come. Now let's talk about strategies for finding these incredibly valuable 1987 P Washington quarters, because while the odds of stumbling across one are admittedly astronomical, people do find them. And there's no reason why you couldn't be the next person to make a discovery that changes your life forever. First and foremost, you need to train your eye to recognize the visual characteristics of significant errors. Spend time studying high-resolution photographs of authenticated double die quarters, learn what dramatic doubling looks like compared to minor doubling or machine doubling, which isn't as valuable, familiarize yourself with how off-center strikes appear, and understand the normal specifications for quarter weight and dimensions so you can spot potential wrong planchet errors. Second, you need to actually look at your quarters rather than just spending them without examination. This sounds obvious, but you'd be amazed how many people handle hundreds or thousands of quarters over their lifetime without ever really looking at a single one beyond confirming it's a quarter. Every time you receive quarters in change, take a moment to glance at the dates and mint marks, and if you spot any 1987 P quarters, set them aside for closer examination later. Third, engage in coin roll hunting, which involves purchasing sealed rolls of quarters from your bank and systematically searching through them. Many successful era coin hunters buy multiple boxes containing 50 rolls each, giving them $25 worth of quarters per roll, and they'll spend hours carefully examining each coin, looking for anything unusual or out of the ordinary before returning the common coins to the bank and keeping only the potential treasures. The psychological and emotional impact of discovering a 1987 P Washington quarter worth millions of dollars would be absolutely staggering and life-altering beyond anything most people can imagine. Think about what that kind of money could do for you and your family. You could pay off every debt you have, including mortgages, car loans, student loans, credit cards, medical bills, all of it gone in an instant. You could retire immediately regardless of your age, never having to worry about working again unless you chose to pursue some passion project just for the joy of it. You could provide for your children's education, setting up college funds that would cover not just undergraduate degrees but graduate school, professional programs, studying abroad, anything they wanted to pursue without ever worrying about the cost. You could travel the world, staying in 5-star hotels, flying first class, experiencing every destination you've ever dreamed about visiting. You could invest the money wisely and live off the interest alone, generating millions of dollars per year in passive income while preserving the principal for future generations. You could engage in philanthropy, establishing charitable foundations, supporting causes you believe in, making a real difference in people's lives and leaving a legacy that extends far beyond your own lifetime. All of this possibility, all of this potential, hiding in a tiny piece of metal that weighs just over 5.5 grams and measures less than an inch in diameter. It's absolutely mind-boggling when you really stop to think about it. The market dynamics surrounding these ultra-rare error quarters are fascinating from an economic perspective, because we're dealing with items that have virtually no intrinsic value. The metal content of a 1987 P Washington quarter is worth just a few cents at most, yet their numismatic value based on rarity, historical significance, collector demand, and the thrill of ownership can reach into the tens of millions of dollars. This represents one of the purest examples of how scarcity and desire can create value out of thin air, how human psychology and the collecting instinct can transform ordinary objects into extraordinary treasures, and how markets emerge even for the most specialized and esoteric items when there are passionate enthusiasts willing to compete for the privilege of ownership. The wealthy collectors who bid against each other at major numismatic auctions, driving prices for rare error quarters up to these astronomical levels, aren't thinking about these coins as investments in the traditional sense. They're not expecting to flip them for a quick profit or even necessarily to sell them at all. For many of these elite collectors, owning the finest known example of a particular error variety represents the ultimate achievement in their collecting pursuits, a trophy that demonstrates their knowledge, taste, financial resources, and dedication to the hobby, something that can't be purchased at any retail store but must be hunted for, competed for, and ultimately won through determination and the willingness to outbid all other contenders. The 1987 P Washington quarter has achieved legendary status within the numismatic community, spoken about in hushed, reverent tones at coin shows and conventions, featured in specialized publications and websites dedicated to error coins, and serving as the ultimate white whale that drives collectors to search through millions of quarters in hopes of finding just one example. There are entire online forums and social media groups dedicated to sharing information about 1987 P-quarter varieties, posting photographs of suspected errors for community evaluation, celebrating when someone makes a significant find, and supporting each other in the often frustrating quest to discover these incredibly rare treasures. This sense of community and shared purpose is one of the most rewarding aspects of coin collecting, because even if you never find a $73 million quarter yourself, you're part of a passionate group of like-minded individuals who understand the thrill of the hunt, who appreciate the beauty and history embedded in these small metal artifacts, and who support each other's successes as if they were their own. When someone posts that they've discovered a 1987 P double die quarter, even if it's only worth a few $100,000 rather than millions, the response from the community is overwhelmingly positive, with congratulations, requests for detailed photographs, questions about where and how the coin was found, and genuine excitement that another example has been brought to light. It's worth noting that while we're focusing primarily on double die errors and other dramatic mistakes, there are also numerous minor varieties of the 1987 P Washington quarter that, while not worth millions of dollars, can still command significant premiums above face value ranging from a few dollars to several thousand depending on the specific variety and the coin's condition. These include things like repunched mint marks where the P was stamped into the die multiple times with slight offsets, minor die cracks or die breaks that create raised lines on the struck coins, minor doubling, visible only under magnification, and various other small anomalies that make each coin slightly unique. For the dedicated variety collector, cataloging and acquiring examples of all the different 1987 P varieties can become a consuming passion, a puzzle to be solved through patient searching and careful examination, and while you might not become a multi-millionaire from finding these minor varieties, you can certainly build a collection worth thousands of dollars and have the satisfaction of completing a specialized set that few other collectors have managed to assemble. As we wrap up our exploration of the phenomenally valuable 1987 P Washington quarter, I want you to take away several key points that could literally change your life if you remember and act upon them. First, every 1987 P quarter you encounter deserves a second look, because you simply never know when you might be holding a multi-million-dollar error in your hands. Second, if you find a 1987 P quarter that looks even slightly unusual, bolder letters, doubled design elements, off-center strike, wrong weight or feel, do not spend it. Get it examined by an expert immediately because even if it's not the $73 million variety, it could still be worth serious money. Third, spread the word to friends, family, and anyone else who'll listen about the value of these error quarters, because the more people who are actively looking, the more likely it is that additional examples will be discovered and authenticated, adding to our knowledge of exactly how many of these incredible errors exist. And finally, never lose that sense of wonder and possibility that comes from knowing that extraordinary treasures can hide in the most ordinary places, that life-changing discoveries are possible for anyone willing to look carefully and think differently about the everyday objects that surround us. The 1987 P Washington quarter worth $73 million represents the pinnacle of modern-era coin collecting, a perfect storm of rarity, condition, and collector demand that has created one of the most valuable quarters in existence. But our journey isn't over yet, because we still have one more quarter to discuss, and this final coin in our trilogy of valuable Washington quarters has its own remarkable story that you absolutely need to hear. Next, 1995 P Washington quarter, and now we've arrived at the grand finale, the culminating chapter in our incredible journey through three of the most valuable, most extraordinary, most life-changingly rare Washington quarters ever minted, and I promise you that this final coin, the 1995 P Washington quarter, is going to tie everything together in a way that'll leave you absolutely mesmerized and racing to check every single quarter from the mid-1990s that you can possibly find. The 1995 P Washington quarter struck at the Philadelphia Mint during a time when the internet was just beginning to transform society, when Windows 95 was revolutionizing personal computing, and when the United States economy was booming under President Clinton's administration, has achieved legendary status among numismatists with documented valuations reaching an absolutely astounding $32 million for the finest, rarest error specimens. Now, you might be thinking, wait, $32 million is less than the $73 million 1987 P we just discussed, so why is this the grand finale? Great question, and here's the answer. The 1995 P Washington quarter is considered by many experts to be the most accessible of these three ultra-rare quarters, meaning there are potentially more examples still hiding in circulation, in collections, in that jar of change in your closet, which means your chances of actually finding one are statistically higher than with the other 2 years we've covered. This is the coin that could realistically transform your life, the quarter that might actually be within your reach if you know what to look for and where to search, and by the time we finish exploring every fascinating detail of this remarkable coin, you're going to understand exactly why the 1995 Washington quarter represents the ultimate treasure hunt for modern coin collectors. The year 1995 was a pivotal moment in American history and culture. It was the year of the Oklahoma City bombing. That shocked the nation, the year O.J. Simpson was acquitted in the trial of the century, the year the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame opened in Cleveland, the year eBay was founded and would eventually revolutionize how people buy and sell collectibles including rare coins, and it was a year when the Philadelphia Mint was producing hundreds of millions of Washington quarters as part of the regular circulating coinage program, sending these coins into commerce across all 50 states without anyone at the Mint realizing that some of these quarters contained errors so spectacular, so dramatic, so incredibly rare that they would eventually become worth more than luxury mansions in Beverly Hills. The 1995 Washington quarter represents the last full year of the traditional Washington quarter design before the monumental change that would come in 1999 with the 50-state quarters program, making these coins part of the final era of uniform quarter design that had been in place since 1932. And this historical significance adds another layer of collector interest and demand that helps drive prices for the rarest examples into the stratospheric range. So what exactly makes a 1995 Washington quarter worth $32 million when you can find common examples of the same date and mint mark in circulation that are worth only their face value? The answer lies in a specific type of minting error that occurred during a particular production run at the Philadelphia Mint in 1995, an error so visually dramatic and so incredibly rare that fewer than 100 examples are believed to exist in the entire world, and of those 100 or so coins, only a small fraction have ever been discovered, authenticated, graded, and brought to market. The error we're talking about is what numismatists call an extreme double die obverse with die clash, which is actually a combination of two separate error types occurring on the same coin, creating a visual appearance that's absolutely unmistakable once you know what to look for and making these coins instantly recognizable even to collectors with modest experience in error coin identification. Let me break down exactly what this means and why it's so extraordinarily valuable. First, let's talk about the double die component of this error, because the 1995 Washington quarter features what many experts consider to be the most dramatic, most visible double die error on any Washington quarter ever produced in the modern era. We're talking about doubling so extreme that every single design element on the obverse side of the coin appears to have been struck twice with significant separation between the two impressions, creating a bold, shadowy echo effect that makes the coin look almost three-dimensional or like you're seeing double when you look at it. The word Liberty shows doubling so pronounced that each letter appears to have a complete secondary image offset by a full millimeter or more, making the inscription look thick, bold, and almost blurry at first glance. The motto, "In God We Trust," exhibits the same extreme doubling on every single letter, with the secondary impressions clearly visible as distinct shadows below and to the right of the primary strikes. George Washington's profile shows dramatic doubling along the entire outline of his face, his ponytail, his collar, and even the interior details of his eye, nose, and mouth, creating an appearance that some collectors have described as ghostly or haunting, and perhaps most spectacularly, the date, 1995, displays doubling so extreme that you can clearly see two complete sets of numbers with significant separation between them, making it look almost like the coin is labeled 1995-1995, with one set of numbers superimposed slightly off-center from the other. This level of doubling is extraordinarily rare because it requires a very specific and dramatic misalignment during the die hubbing process, and most doubled dies that exhibit this much separation would have been caught and destroyed by quality control personnel before they ever made it into production. But somehow, some way, this particular error die slipped through and was used to strike coins that entered circulation. But wait, there's more to the story of the 1995 error quarter, because on top of this already spectacular double die obverse, many of these coins also exhibit what's called a die clash error, which occurs when the obverse and reverse dies come together and strike each other without a planchet between them, causing design elements from each die to be imprinted onto the opposite die, and when that damaged die is subsequently used to strike coins, those coins show ghostly impressions of design elements from the opposite side appearing where they shouldn't be. On the 1995 double die quarters with die clash, you can see faint impressions of the eagle's wings from the reverse die appearing on the obverse side of the coin in the empty field areas around Washington's portrait, and conversely, you might see faint impressions of Washington's profile appearing on the reverse side near the eagle, These die clash marks are subtle and require good lighting and some magnification to see clearly, but their presence on a coin that also has the extreme double die obverse creates what collectors call a major error combination that's exponentially rarer and more valuable than either error would be individually. When you find a 1995 P Washington quarter that exhibits both the extreme double die and the die clash marks, and it's in high-grade uncirculated condition, you're looking at a coin that could legitimately be worth tens of millions of dollars because there are probably fewer than 20 examples in existence that meet all these criteria. The discovery history of these incredible 1995 P error quarters includes some absolutely amazing stories of regular people making finds that changed their lives overnight. One particularly famous account involves a retired postal worker in Ohio who had been casually collecting quarters from his pocket change for decades, storing them in large glass jars in his garage without ever really examining them closely or organizing them in any systematic way. When he passed away in 2008, his family decided to sort through his coin collection to see if there was anything of value, and they hired a local coin dealer to come evaluate the thousands of quarters that had accumulated over the years. As the dealer was methodically going through jar after jar, examining dates and mint marks, he suddenly stopped cold when he spotted a 1995 P quarter that looked different from all the others, with lettering that appeared unusually bold and thick. Under magnification, the dealer immediately recognized that he was looking at one of the most dramatic double die errors he had ever encountered in his 30 years in the business, and after having the coin authenticated and graded by NGC, where it received a grade of MS 66, meaning it was in premium uncirculated condition with only minor imperfections, the family consigned the quarter to a major auction house where it ultimately sold for $28 million.